I loved making that thing, and when it came to me, it wasn't on the radar of anyone. I recognized what I thought was great writing.
Kevin Costner had a secret weapon in his Yellowstone contract that the studio,
What it could be, and I believed so much in it that I wanted to take people on that ride, and I went over and
desperately wanted to take away from him. What if I told you that behind all the cowboy drama,
sold it overseas, and I think, a belief, stood behind Taylor's good.
and ranch battles on screen, there was an even bigger war happening behind the cameras? And what if I told you that when Costner finally decided to use his secret power, it didn't just end his time on the show, it blew up the entire future of Yellowstone forever? Well, buckle up, because today we're diving deep into the real story of why Kevin Costner will never, ever return to Yellowstone. And trust me, it's way more shocking than anything you've seen on the show. You see, when Kevin Costner signed on to play John Dutton, he wasn't just another actor taking a job. He was a Hollywood legend who had learned some hard lessons about trusting studios. And those lessons led him to demand something in his contract that would later become the nuclear option that destroyed everything. But to understand why Costner walked away from millions of dollars and the biggest hit of his later career, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to understand how a boy from California became one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and how that power eventually led to the biggest showdown in television history. Kevin Costner wasn't born into Hollywood royalty. He was just a regular kid from Linwood, California, whose dad worked his way up from digging ditches to becoming an executive at an electric company. His mom worked with families who were struggling, which taught Kevin early on to care about other people's problems. But Kevin's childhood was anything but stable. Every time his dad got promoted, the family had to move. Kevin felt like he was always the new kid at school, always trying to make friends all over again. They moved from Linwood to Compton, then to Ventura, then Visalia, and finally back to Orange County. Imagine having to start over every few years. It would make anyone feel anxious and unsure of themselves. But all that moving around taught Kevin something valuable. He learned how to watch people carefully and understand what they were feeling. These skills would later make him an incredible actor, but back then, they just helped him survive being the outsider. Even though Kevin struggled in school, and his teachers called him a poor student, there was something special brewing inside him. He played sports like basketball, football, and baseball, even though he was only 5 feet 2 inches tall when he graduated high school. He also took piano lessons, wrote poetry, and sang in his church choir. Most people around him had no idea he had this creative side. The summer he graduated high school, Kevin did something that showed his adventurous spirit. He built his own canoe and paddled down the same rivers that Lewis and Clark had traveled hundreds of years before. It was like he was already drawn to the American frontier, the same spirit that would later make him perfect for westerns like Yellowstone. When Kevin went to college at California State University, Fullerton, he studied business because that seemed like the safe, smart thing to do. His parents had lived through tough times, and they wanted him to have a secure job. His dad always told him, "Don't ever let anybody outwork you, and they'll never take your job." Kevin believed this advice and planned to work in an office somewhere. But during his last year of college, Kevin started doing something he kept completely secret, even from his girlfriend Cindy, who would later become his wife. 5 nights a week, he was taking acting classes. He even auditioned for a play, and even though he didn't get the part, he was completely hooked. He was living a double life, preparing for a business career during the day and chasing his acting dreams at night. The moment that changed everything happened on Kevin's honeymoon in 1978. He and Cindy were flying back from Mexico, and they were so broke that they had to take an $8 bus ride from the airport with all their stuff crammed into one suitcase. But on that plane, Kevin noticed someone sitting just a few rows away, the legendary actor Richard Burton. Now, most people would have been too scared to approach a famous movie star, but Kevin gathered up his courage and walked over. He told Burton that he was hoping to become an actor, but he was worried about all the drama that seemed to follow celebrities. He wanted to know if that kind of crazy life was just part of being an actor. Burton looked at Kevin with those famous green eyes and said, "You have green eyes." "I have green eyes. I think you'll be fine." They talked for about 20 minutes, and Burton gave Kevin the encouragement he needed to chase his dreams. But the story gets even better. When the plane landed, Kevin and Cindy were sitting on their suitcase waiting for that cheap bus. Suddenly, a fancy limousine pulled up right in front of them. The window rolled down, and there was Richard Burton. He leaned out and simply said, "Good luck to you." Then the car drove away. Kevin never saw Burton again, but that moment stayed with him forever. Kevin tried working a regular business job for exactly 1 month after college. 1 month. He realized that sitting in an office all day meant he couldn't. He'd go to auditions or acting classes, so he quit. Instead, he took a job as a stage manager at a Hollywood studio, which kept him close to the movie business while he continued learning how to pay the bills. Kevin worked as a truck driver, on fishing boats, as a carpenter, and even as a Hollywood tour guide. These were tough years, but his wife, Cindy, supported him every step of the way. Every small acting job helped them survive, and Kevin was building his skills and making connections. His first movie was something called Sizzle Beach, USA, a low-budget romantic comedy that Kevin was so embarrassed about. He later tried to buy the rights just to keep people from seeing it. The company said no, and when Kevin became famous, they re-released it to make money off his success. It even ended up on a TV show called Mystery Science Theater 3000, where comedians made fun of bad movies. Everything started to change in 1985 when Kevin got a role in a Western called Silverado. The director had promised Kevin a good part after cutting most of his scenes from another movie called The Big Chill. In Silverado, Kevin played a wild, unpredictable gunfighter, and even though the movie wasn't a huge hit, critics and industry people noticed his charisma right away. But Kevin's real big break came in 1987 with The Untouchables, and it almost didn't happen. The lead role was first offered to Don Johnson, the guy from Miami Vice, but he turned it down because he didn't want to be typecast as a law enforcement officer. Director Brian De Palma wasn't sure about Kevin either, until Steven Spielberg and other big names convinced him to give this relatively unknown actor a chance, with a huge gamble that paid off big time. The Untouchables made over $106 million worldwide and got 4 Academy Award nominations. Sean Connery won Best Supporting Actor, and suddenly everyone in Hollywood knew who Kevin Costner was. That same year, Kevin proved he wasn't just a one-hit wonder with another movie called No Way Out, where he played opposite Gene Hackman. Having 2 major studio successes in 1 year instantly made him one of Hollywood's most wanted stars. In 1988, Kevin took on Bull Durham, a baseball movie that nearly never got made. The writer-director had his script rejected by every major studio twice. Even with Kevin's enthusiasm for the story, no one wanted to take the risk. Eventually, the film was made on a tiny budget of about $6 to $9 million. To everyone's surprise, it became a cultural phenomenon, making over $50 million in North America. That was more than 8 times what it cost to make. Sports Illustrated later ranked it as the greatest sports movie of all time, and it appeared on countless best of lists. The success of Bull Durham set up Kevin's next baseball movie, Field of Dreams, in 1989. These films, along with later projects, became known as his baseball trilogy. What makes this story so amazing is how close Hollywood came to turning down 2 of the most beloved baseball movies ever made. Without Kevin's persistence, we might never have seen these incredible films. WY 1990. Kevin was ready to take control of his career in a way that would later become crucial to understanding what happened with Yellowstone. He started his own production company called TIG Productions. At the height of his fame, Kevin wanted to control the stories he told, not just act in movies other people made. Their first project was the ambitious Dances with Wolves, and this is where Kevin's story becomes really important for understanding what happened decades later with Yellowstone. Major studios were hesitant to back the film, so Kevin and his partner took a huge risk. They sold international rights first, which covered 40% of the budget before they even had a studio deal. Most importantly, Kevin secured something called final cut rights, which meant no one could change the film without his approval. That kind of power was almost unheard of for a first-time director. This was Kevin learning that in Hollywood, if you don't have control, someone else will make decisions that could ruin your work. When the budget for Dances with Wolves started running short, Kevin put $3 million of his own money into the project to keep it going. People in Hollywood were mocking it, calling it Kevin's Gate after a famous movie disaster from 1980. They thought Kevin was making a huge mistake with a nearly 4-hour Western about Native American culture. But the risk paid off in a huge way. At the Academy Awards in 1991, Dances with Wolves won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Kevin. He became only the 3rd person in Oscar history to win Best Director with his very first film. The movie also won the Golden Globe for Best Picture and was later preserved in the Library of Congress for its cultural importance. This success taught Kevin 2 crucial lessons that would shape his entire career, including his approach to Yellowstone. First, he learned that sometimes you have to risk everything for a project you believe in. Second, he learned that having control over the final product was absolutely essential. Kevin's star power was proven again with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991. Even though critics were brutal, Roger Ebert gave it only 2 stars, and people made fun of Kevin for not using an English accent. Audiences loved it. The movie made almost $391 million worldwide and became the 2nd highest-grossing film of the year. Then came The Bodyguard in 1992, which became one of the most successful romantic thrillers of all time. The movie made over $400 million worldwide, but it was Whitney Houston's soundtrack that really took over the world. It sold more than 45 million copies globally, making it the best-selling movie soundtrack in history. Why this time, Kevin wasn't just a star. He was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. For The Bodyguard, he earned between $20 and $30 million with profit sharing included. Studios were willing to give him not only massive paychecks, but also creative control, because his name alone could guarantee international success. But this success came with a price. Kevin became known for his perfectionism and his insistence on controlling nearly every aspect of a film. He was deeply involved in scripts, editing, and the overall vision. He refused to let anyone make changes behind his back, explaining that if a story wasn't given the chance to shine, both the film and its audience were cheated. This perfectionism and need for control would later become major issues when Kevin signed on for Yellowstone. But before we get to that, Kevin's career hit some major bumps in the mid-1990s that taught him even more hard lessons about trusting studios and maintaining control. In 1995, Kevin made one of the most expensive movies ever at the time, Waterworld. The budget ballooned from $65 million to an unbelievable $175 million. Filming on the open ocean caused endless delays from unpredictable weather and equipment breakdowns. Kevin clashed with the director, and the production became infamous for its problems. Even though the film earned $264 million worldwide, its massive costs meant it was labeled a failure. Critics mocked it, and the industry saw it as a symbol of Hollywood excess. That same year, Kevin was also going through a painful divorce from his first wife, Cindy, which cost him $80 million, one of the largest settlements in Hollywood history at the time. Things got even worse in 1997 when Kevin directed, produced, and starred in The Postman. He poured much of his own money into its $80 million budget, convinced it would be a triumph. Instead, it was a disaster, earning just $20 million worldwide. The humiliation reached a peak in 1998 when The Postman swept the Razzie Awards, winning every category it was nominated for, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. Overnight, the man who had been Hollywood's most bankable star became a punchline. But these failures taught Kevin valuable lessons about the importance of having the right partnerships and the right level of control over his projects. Kevin spent the next several years rebuilding his reputation with smaller, more focused projects. In 2003, he directed and starred in Open Range with Robert Duvall. The Western, made on a modest budget, received glowing reviews and proved he still had the ability to create meaningful films. Through the late 1990s and early 2000s, he took on more supporting roles, slowly rebuilding his reputation. In 2012, Kevin won an Emmy Award for the History Channel miniseries Hatfields and McCoys, which told the story of one of America's most famous family feuds. The show drew 14.3 million viewers for its finale, breaking records for basic cable. The win marked a turning point for Kevin, showing that after decades in film, he could just as easily dominate television. This success led directly to what would become both the biggest triumph and the most painful betrayal of Kevin's later career, Yellowstone. When Taylor Sheridan first pitched Yellowstone, HBO passed on it. The show eventually landed at Paramount Network, a channel desperate for its first major hit. No one could have predicted that Yellowstone would become cable's most-watched show, but Kevin saw the potential right away. However, Kevin's experience with studios over the decades had taught him to be very careful about contracts. He had learned that if you don't protect yourself legally, studios will find ways to control you, change your work, or even get rid of you when it's convenient for them. When Kevin signed his Yellowstone contract, he made sure to include several crucial protections. First, he secured approval rights over scripts, meaning the writers couldn't just hand him any dialogue and expect him to say it. Second, he negotiated scheduling protections so the show couldn't completely take over his life and prevent him from doing other projects. And most importantly, he included a clause that prevented his character, John Dutton, from being killed off in a dishonorable or humiliating way. This last protection was Kevin's nuclear option, his secret weapon that the studio desperately wanted to take away from him. Kevin had seen too many actors have their characters destroyed by writers who wanted to punish them or write them out of shows in embarrassing ways. He wasn't going to let that happen to John Dutton. Yellowstone premiered in 2018 and quickly became a massive success. The show drew 21 million viewers for its Season 5 premiere in 2024, making it a cultural phenomenon. At 63, Kevin found himself at the center of the biggest hit of his later career. In 2023, he even won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Television Drama, making him the first actor from Yellowstone to ever win a Golden Globe. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Kevin was simultaneously working on his passion project, a 4-part Western epic called Horizon, an American saga. This wasn't just another movie for Kevin. It was the project he had been dreaming about for years. He didn't just invest $20 million, as many people believed. He actually mortgaged his $50 million Santa Barbara estate and put in $38 million of his own money. When Disney backed out of the project, Kevin spent years searching for partners. The total budget climbed past $100 million. It was a breathtaking gamble that showed Kevin's faith in the project, but it also meant he needed flexibility in his schedule to promote and support the film. This is where the conflict with Yellowstone began. Taylor Sheridan and Paramount wanted Kevin to be available for longer shooting schedules and more episodes. But Kevin's contract gave him the right to limit his time on the show, so he could work on other projects like Horizon. By 2023, tensions had boiled over. Kevin felt betrayed by the studio, telling reporters he had taken a beating from Paramount. Sheridan complained that lawyers had made communication impossible. Reports claimed Kevin was only offering 1 week of filming time, while Kevin argued that delays were caused by Sheridan's slow script writing. The mistrust deepened as both sides dug in. Kevin demanded final approval over scripts and reminded everyone about his contract clause preventing John Dutton from being killed off dishonorably. The studio wanted more control over Kevin's schedule and character. The feud became so toxic that the show's planned longer run was cut short. Instead of continuing for several more seasons, Yellowstone would end with Season 5. But even this wasn't enough to repair the relationship. When Horizon, Chapter 1 finally hit theaters in 2024, the results were devastating for Kevin personally. Despite all his effort and financial risk, the film brought in only $29 million worldwide, nowhere near its $100 million budget. Warner Brothers even postponed the release of the second chapter, though it was already finished. Kevin admitted the project needed to be a huge hit just to survive, but audiences didn't connect with his 3-hour Western epic. Critics said it felt out of step with modern tastes, leaving Kevin with one of the biggest personal financial losses Hollywood had ever seen. Now Kevin was in an impossible position. He had invested everything in Horizon, but it wasn't successful enough to support the massive investment. Meanwhile, his relationship with Yellowstone had become so poisonous that working with Taylor Sheridan and Paramount felt impossible. But here's where Kevin's secret contract clause became his nuclear option. Remember, Kevin had negotiated the right to prevent John Dutton from being killed off in a dishonorable way. As the conflict escalated, Industry insiders began hearing rumors that Sheridan and Paramount were discussing exactly that, killing off John Dutton in a way that would be humiliating for both the character and Kevin. Some reports suggested they wanted to have John Dutton die in a way that would make him look weak, cowardly, or foolish. Others suggested they wanted to kill him off-screen in an anticlimactic way that would minimize Kevin's importance to the show. These weren't just creative decisions. They were acts of revenge against an actor who had refused to give the studio complete control. When Kevin learned about these discussions, he realized he had only one option left. He could use his contract clause to prevent them from destroying John Dutton, but that would mean leaving the show entirely. Or he could stay and risk having his character ruined in a way that would damage his reputation and legacy. Kevin chose to protect his character and his dignity, even if it meant walking away from the $12 to $15 million per season he was earning from Yellowstone. On June 21st, 2024, he posted that famous Instagram video with a simple message: "I won't be returning. I'll see you at the movies." Just days earlier, interviews had suggested a possible return, so the sudden finality hit fans and the industry like a thunderbolt. The announcement was emotional and final, and it meant Kevin was walking away from the role that had defined his late career. But Kevin's decision wasn't just about money or scheduling conflicts. It was about something much deeper. The same principles that had driven him to fight for final cut rights on Dances with Wolves, to invest his own money in projects he believed in, and to never let studios destroy his work. Kevin had learned over decades in Hollywood that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to maintain your integrity. He had seen what happened when actors let studios push them around, when they gave up control of their characters and their stories. He had made the decision long ago that he would never let that happen to him. The real reason Kevin Costner will never return to Yellowstone isn't about scheduling conflicts or money disputes. It's about a man who spent his entire career learning that in Hollywood, if you don't fight for control of your own story, someone else will write an ending you can't live with. Kevin chose to write his own ending for John Dutton by leaving on his own terms, rather than staying and risking having his character destroyed by people who wanted to punish him for not being controllable. His secret contract clause, the one that prevented John Dutton from being killed dishonorably, became the weapon he used to protect not just his character, but his own dignity and legacy. In the end, Kevin Costner's departure from Yellowstone is the story of an artist who refused to compromise his principles, even when it cost him millions of dollars and one of the biggest hits of his career. It's the story of someone who learned that sometimes walking away is the only way to win. And that, folks, is the real reason why Kevin Costner will never, ever return to Yellowstone. It wasn't just about one show or one character. It was about a lifetime of lessons that taught him that some things are more valuable than money, and some battles are worth fighting even when you know you'll lose everything to us. Oh, what do you think about Kevin Costner's decision? Do you believe he was right to walk away from Yellowstone to protect his character and his principles? Or do you think he should have found a way to work things out with the studio? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing your thoughts. If this story opened your eyes to what really goes on behind the scenes in Hollywood, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. And if you want to see more deep dives into the real stories behind your favorite shows and movies, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we're covering next.